Today I'm going to talk about my experience and how I helped engineer managers to get promoted. Okay? So first I'm going to start by talking about who am I. I'm a software engineer. I've been doing, coding for more than 20 years. I've been working with American companies and LATAM development teams for 20 years. I've been improving software development processes for more than 10 years, trained more than 100 engineers, and I launched more than a dozen software products, right? So I've been around. So there are three things that we require for a LATAM outsourced engineering team to be successful, right? So the first one is leveraging their unique cultural strengths. I'm going to talk about what are the cultural differences. We're going to talk about a controlled isolation, a framework for controlled isolation, and how we evaluate these teams, okay? Great. So what are the differences between the US and the LATAM cultures? So one is puns. In the US, puns are frowned upon, whereas in LATAM, puns are celebrated. People enjoy jokes with puns. There's also different communication styles. So we have in the US a more direct communication style. In LATAM, we have an indirect communication style. So for instance, in LATAM, if somebody invites you to a meeting, to a wedding, to a social gathering, people usually say yes, even though they mean no, right? It's rude to say no, right? So important difference, right? Then there is a difference between individualism and collectivism. In LATAM, people tend to value more the community, their families, and that defines them as a person, right? So they value that family ties more, right? Actually, I had a situation with an engineer where his family would ask him to go and pick up his brothers and sisters from school, take them here, take them there. So that started affecting because he would start to disappear during the day without notice. So we had to work that out, and that came out of duty. He feels a duty, a compromise to his family, so he wants to support them in different ways, right? Another important factor that happens between LATAM and the US is that in LATAM, time is fluid, right? It's not a fixed concept. It's something that is malleable, right? So it is very common for people to have a start hour, but not an end hour. And even if they do, they don't respect it. They keep, the gathering, the meeting, right? It is usually common to start a meeting late because there are social interaction happening before that, right? That's how people in LATAM perceive time. There is a word they say al rato, which means later, but it's not really later. It means I'm not going to do it. Al rato could be 5 minutes, could be 5 hours, right? It really is a way to push further, but and that's something that it's you lose it in the translation, so it's difficult to explain, right? But that's a very important cultural difference, right? Another one is work-life balance. People in LATAM, they want to have a work-life balance. Is something more important for them than in the US, where in the US, people are more used to like focus work, get the job done. In LATAM, they're they want to work, but they also want to take care of the family and things like that, right? So it is an important difference. Another important difference is that hierarchy in LATAM is much more formal. So, doctors, policemen, they have a much more, respect compared to the US, right? They have this authority figure. They have they have more respect to that, right? And that can be sometimes overwhelming for LATAM people when they're talking with an authoritative figure, right? There are more differences. I try to summarize them as much as possible, right? So let's talk about what are the pros and cons of this culture, because what we want to do is want to first understand that culture and then leverage it, right? One of the things that happens is that LATAM developers, they have a deep desire to prove value, right? So they're going to go above and beyond and work really, really hard to prove themselves, right? And that's part of their culture, right? They are hard workers, right? They're more resilient, right? And they have higher tenacity, so they can support bad weather, which is good. But that also comes with one con, that is they tend to overcommit, right? Because the way that I explain it is they tend to overcommit out of love, out of duty, right? Because they want to please, they want to deliver. But the thing is that if we see it on the American side, what we're seeing is somebody that is underperforming because he overcommitted. And that could cause a lot of friction. And then, as I mentioned before, the hierarchies create an issue where they are afraid to speak up, to say, hey, we can do this better, right? They are afraid to push back. So they're going to say yes to everything. They're going to be afraid to saying, hey, there's a better way to do this, right? And that's rooted on that, culturally, they see speaking up as a way to, I'm going to be reprimanded by speaking up, right? So, yes, that's how it works, right? So we need to leverage this situation. So one of the things we need to do is build trust. Let them know that if you have a LATAM developer, let them know that they can speak up and there are not going to be consequences to that, right? Usually, what I've seen working is to start in smaller, smaller audience, in private, or asking feedback anonymously, right? That also helps up for them to speak up, right? Which is something that if you don't know that cultural difference, you don't know that you have to look for that, right? Teaching the use of time based on the monochromic time, it's fixed. It's time is valuable, right? They quickly get it, but it's something that it needs to be taught, right? They need to learn that, right? And the way that I explain it to my team is, you're in an island, right? You're living in Mexico, right? You're in the ocean, and then you have an island. So what happens in the island is completely different, right? So this island is, when you go to work, you have to be on time. You have to follow this behavior. You have to change your programming. Now you're in America. You're working with an American company, so you have to behave exactly like that, right? So setting those boundaries, so they understand that context, that whatever happens inside, they have to follow the American way, and then they can go outside and enjoy the family, enjoy having their life, living their life the Mexican way, if you like, right? So building trust, teaching the value of time, double, triple verify that the commitments are realistic. Usually what I see happening is, on stand-ups, on Scrum meetings, with big audience, they are going to overcommit, right? And then, what I've seen working is, after that, on a one-on-one, verifying, is that really something that can be achieved, or are you overstretching it, right? So you have to ask twice, you need to ask 3 times. Eventually, it's something that they learn, but it's a process. They need that learning curve, right? And And then another one that I teach them a lot is the direct communication, right? That again is a learning curve, but they can learn it, especially when they see that there are no consequences for speaking up. When they see that I can speak my mind and I'm not going to be persecuted by that, right? It is actually the other way around. If I don't speak my mind, then I'm not providing value to the team, right? So that's another important one. And then another one that I teach them is I teach them about proactive communication. So basically that means I am going in that direction. I'm going to start walking, I'm building software, so I'm going in this direction. I am going to do this, and I can verbalize that on Jira comments. I can put that on Slack channels or whatever, but basically saying where I'm going to go, so that way the manager, the team leader can see if the direction I'm going is roughly in the direction that I have to go, or if I'm going in the completely wrong direction, and then they can, say, hey, stop, you're going, you completely missed the point, right? So that helps because we can save time, we can save money, we can save building stuff that is not going to be used, right? And it's not going to provide any lesson other than, you wasted time, right? So I didn't put it here, but it's something that it also helped me to get the engineering teams to be more effective, right? Because that way they can understand when they are making assumptions or when they are reading the requirements, right? And distinguishing both of them takes time. So using that, proactive communication approach helps them to validate what they're doing is valuable, right? It's going to be, worthwhile. Okay, so we talk a little bit about the different cultures. Now we're going to talk about the isolation. So where the isolation comes from? Well, it comes from because we have a language barrier, we have a cultural barrier, we have a geographic barrier. We have people, working in Mexico or LATAM, and people working in the US, right? So there's going to be this isolation. So the success of the team depends on how we design that bridge, how we're going to resolve that isolation, right? Now, and I have it further down, but in the ideal world, we want that team seamlessly integrated, right? And I've seen that happen, and it's amazing. That takes time, right? It's building trust, it's building the relationship between the people to make that happen. But we can use the isolation in our advantage in some situations, right? So, for instance, so before I talk about the scenarios, so one of the things that we need is to have well-defined responsibilities, right? If we expect a LATAM developer to start acting as a product owner, well, that's not going to work very well, right? If we don't give the developers good, clear requirements and how they need to, how they need to interact with the rest of the organization, that is going to also cause problems, right? And that's the clear design of cross-functional integration. I've been able to work on teams where we start with zero interactions from the rest of the company, and then we build up the cross-functional interactions with other departments until we can get to where the product owner, we can sit down with the product owner, go through all the requirements, provide feedback, go back and forth, and then we can get all that and start working on it, right? And we can take all the responsibility until it is launched, right? So going from complete isolation to that seamless integration, it takes time, right? But it is possible. So if you have cultural issues on your current team, having an isolated team is great, because You can create a new culture, right? Minimize the exposure. You can leverage that isolation, and then you have a team that is hardworking, that is getting things done, and now you can say, okay, this is how we can take these lessons and implement it on the rest of the team, right? Another place where the isolation works is when we have the product owners providing clear requirements. If that's not happening, if the product owners are getting within the product development process, then that's an issue. So having an outsourced team allows you to create these new social contracts, basically, where the product owner is not going to poke around the developer desktop and say, hey, can you build me this because I want it, right? So now you have a more formal process of how the requirements get in the development team, right? And this is where I've seen a lot of success, and we were able to take the whole life cycle of the feature, right? So we became we took vertical responsibility. And that means that we had accountability if the feature failed. We had the accountability, of what happened after that, right? Another important thing here is the product owner needs to be able to, or should be able to, write all the error messages. Because what I've seen happen is that the product owner thinks, oh, I want to do step 1, step 2, step 3, the workflow, the happy path. But then they forget the validation errors and all that stuff. And then, can a LATAM developer write them down? Sure, he can make them up. But usually what happens is that when that feature is shown internally on reviews, there's a lot of pushback, because there are nuances on the languages that, LATAM developers usually miss. And they're there to code, they're not there to write. So, it is best to, instead of having to go back and forth, get the product owners to get those messages from the beginning. So how I've done it that to make it work is I got UX designers sitting down with product owners and saying, hey, please, can you help us? Can you give us all the requirements through the UX? So the UX would sit down, build the mockups, and the UX will start asking all the questions while the development team is undisturbed, uninterrupted. We collect all the requirements, we build all the mockups, the happy path, the negative happy path, everything. And then from there, we get the requirements, formally the requirements on a document, but we also get the UX with all the answers, because he has a deep understanding of the feature. He understands what the product owner is thinking, right? Because they sit down, they went back and forth, right? So we save product owners time because we have the UX next to us, and we can bomb them with questions. What does that mean, right? What are they trying to say here, right? So that's important. Okay, as I mentioned before, ultimate goal should be seamless integration, and what I've done after that is we were able to get the LATAM devs understand that what they're doing is adding value to the users, right? And that's the ultimate business outcome that the software engineer, will be doing, right? So I've seen also work this with pod models. Here it's important to have a local tech leader assigned to the team. I've seen it working with tech leaders from the outsourced team, but again, it takes time to build that, that leadership, right? About evaluations, here it's important that you, as a manager, evaluate every engineer, right? Because you can evaluate the vendor, but then the engineers, the quality of the engineers can vary a lot. So it is important for you to validate that as well. Don't rely on seniority levels, because the seniority levels, they can say, oh, he worked 3 years or 5 years or whatever, but that doesn't translate directly to the expectations of American managers. So try to avoid that. And then run your screening process based on skills and job description, right? Because that helps you focus on what is it that you need, right? The way that I did it on my company is I screened the best 2%. So I try to avoid this issue. So the managers that work with me eventually trust me enough that they don't need to do the evaluations, right? Because we have a proven track record, right? But that, again, it took me 7 years to build. Okay. And then another important part from the evaluation is designing a career path, because with that, you can increase the retention. Because now that you have a team that is working, you don't want to let them go, right? So building a career path, based on your future need. What are you planning to do in the future? And then after that, build performance evaluation so they have a clear expectation of what are the things that are going to happen. That allows you to keep the team, not leaving the team, right? So I was able to achieve 3.5 years of average tenure thanks of the things that I've been doing with my team. So it works, right? And happy to share more details if you have questions, right? Based on all that, and I'm using the DORA framework because that way I can see in a high level how all of these strategies that I've been using works, right? So on lead time for changes, I was able to first achieve predictability. I was able to estimate when we're going to deliver every new feature, right? First, and then we focus on quantity. Can we add more, right? Now that we achieve every week, every sprint for the last 5 sprints, we're able to achieve the goal. Okay, can we add one more, right? The deployment frequency, we improve that by having a reliable CI green light, basically. We had no production rollbacks. And then the way that we improve the failure rate is that we were able to work with the team to say, okay, when the developer says that the feature is done, it is actually done. We work with the QAs where we teach the developers to think as QAs from the beginning of the feature. We build a test plan from the beginning of the feature, right? When we're thinking about the requirements, right? And then when we're launching it, right? So we had a lot of improvement cycles on that, and that helped a lot. Basically, we were able to reduce significantly the bugs, okay? I ran out of time, but I'm more than happy to continue the conversation if you guys have questions. We have a booth somewhere here, and you can add me to LinkedIn if you want. Okay, thank you guys.